I'm Nadia Gurwell.
I'm John Gugliatino.
I'm Michelle Blanchard. Welcome to 30 Minutes. Welcome to 30 Minutes. I am your host, Michelle Blanchard. Joining us today is Anthony DiCaprio of AD Tax Prep in Danbury, Connecticut. He is a registered tax preparer and is here to discuss the recent tax code changes under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Acts of 2017. That's a mouthful.
You're not kidding.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for
Thank you.
joining
It's
us.
great to be here. Yes, it is. It's a mouthful, and it is a sweeping tax act, and it covers all aspects of taxation, both individual and business.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
So before we start on our conversation, would you mind telling the viewers who do not know you a little bit about yourself?
Surely. I moved to Danbury in 1985, and I started my tax practice that year. Started off with 2 customers, and over the years I've developed a clientele of about 1,200 clients. So
Oh, wow.
it's a fairly significant tax business. I operate out of Danbury, and I have an office in Southbury as well.
Okay. And I can imagine you have been very busy, even though we're kind of on the cusp of the tax season.
Yeah, for the past month or so, the phone hasn't stopped ringing.
Yes.
I've gotten questions on the new tax law, questions on Connecticut and the new W-4P that has to be filled
Yes,
out. And
absolutely.
So yeah, it's been quite a busy preseason.
Yes. So a little backstory before I ask the first, I think, big question. My son and I were driving in the car. He's 13, middle school, 7th grade. And they must have been talking about the recent tax changes. So he asked me if we were middle class. And I have a sense of middle class and all of that. So and it kind of prompted me. I don't really know the definition of middle class under the Tax Cuts Jobs Act. So I Googled it this morning, and based on the information I have, and please correct me if I'm
Sure.
wrong, because there were varying ranges, but they're basically saying that about 42% of households are considered middle class. And the range is between $42,000 and $126,000 for a family of 3. Now, the reason I asked the question is because the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was really geared towards helping middle class. In your experience, are you seeing that?
Well, it's kind of too soon to tell
Right.
100%, but that's about what's happening.
Okay.
It seems to be that way, and we'll go through some examples as we talk. But
Absolutely.
it seems that those numbers are correct.
Okay.
And that it's going to help people in that range somewhat.
Yes.
Some more than others. It depends.
And you're right, there's so many variables out there, and the IRS is still issuing guidance, and you have not received any updated information for your tax software.
No, not at all. I first heard about it in early December when they started discussing it, and then they talked about it, and the Senate had a version, the House had a version, which were substantially different than that what came out.
Right.
They negotiated it, and they came out with what we have now. And so it's been maybe 2 or 3 weeks that we've tried to assimilate what they've said.
Right, try to get our arms around.
There are things we still don't know about it.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What do you consider to be the biggest change under the tax code?
Well, I think that the biggest change is for businesses.
Okay.
Both big business and small business, self-employed people, S corporations, small C corporations, partnerships. I would say that is the single biggest change.
Okay.
But there are numerous changes on individuals, and some quite significant as well.
Right. So under the corporate changes, their tax rate is going to be reduced from 35% to 21%.
That's correct. And also there was another issue with the corporations because they were in the past subject to alternative minimum tax.
Yes, absolutely.
If they had just done that, it would not have made much difference. But what they did was they repealed the corporate alternative minimum tax.
Yes.
So that they can now take advantage still of those credits, which they would not have been able to take advantage of had the alternative minimum tax still been there.
Good point. And what we're starting to see too is corporations such as, was reading this morning, Walmart. They're increasing their, I guess their minimum wage, their starting hourly rate to $11 an hour based on these cuts. So companies are already starting to factor in the big savings that they're going to.
I think that one of the reasons that they came out with this is that there's a trickle-down effect.
Absolutely.
And maybe some companies would do more than others in that regard. Walmart started it. On the other hand, they also closed 63 Sam's Clubs.
Yes.
So I don't know what effect that has on it either.
But I think too that, and I didn't read entirely into this, but I do think that some of those centers that they're closing, the Sam's Clubs, they're making them into e-commerce distribution centers, which
they probably need.
Yeah. So there's definitely restructuring
but I
going on.
I think it will have that trickle down effect.
Yes. I'm hoping.
Will the individual see a lot of it? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
It's too soon to tell.
It's too soon to tell.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's delve into the changes in the individual side.
Yes.
The loss of the personal exemptions.
Yes, the individuals, there are a couple of things that happened with the individual taxes. Number one, they about doubled the standard deduction, which means that before a married filing jointly couple would get a standard deduction of $13,000 a year. Now it's $24,000 a year.
Right.
So if your itemized deductions are less than $24,000 a year, you would take the standard deduction. So it eliminated a lot of people using the itemized deduction.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, they did double the standard deduction, but they removed the exemptions.
Right.
So let's take that same married filing jointly couple. Okay, they gained about I don't know, $12,000 or $13,000. Let's say $13,000, or really $12,000 or $11,000, and they lost about $8,200 in exemptions. So that difference is really what it comes down to.
Right.
Now that married filing jointly couple, if they have one child, they're in the negative when it comes to the difference in deductions and exemptions.
So they don't benefit.
So they don't benefit. As a matter of fact, they get hurt by it.
Right. Even with the increase in the child?
Well, there's a child tax credit, which has gone from $1,000 to $2,000, and that will help some of them.
Right.
On individuals, you can say, I've got a couple of little examples here. Taxable income on a married filing jointly couple that's making $95,000 a year would save in taxes about $2,455.
No children?
With no children.
No children, okay.
I've got a head of household lady that has 2 children. Lady, man, doesn't matter.
Right.
And making a taxable income of $45,000, they save about $958. So there is savings. There is savings to be had. It's not uniform across the board.
Everybody's
it depends
situation.
on certain factors, and these change dramatically depending on your situation.
Absolutely.
If you have 8 children,
8?
for example, well, let's just say you have 8 children.
Okay.
I don't know.
I can barely manage my 2.
Besides
That was my
taxes,
reaction.
there's a lot of other issues too. But if you have 8 children at $4,100 a child, okay, that's you
significant.
lose exemptions of $30,000.
Right, that's significant.
So I don't know how you make that up.
Right.
Now you do get child tax credit if the children are 16 or under. So that may make up some of it. But there's something in it for almost everybody.
right.
But those are two of the examples that I have, and I'm sure you might have some others.
I do have an example, yes. And one, like you, we were getting calls towards the end of the year, more so about the property tax, the change in the property tax deduction, which is now property and state tax deduction, which is now limited to $10,000. So we
Yeah.
were getting calls from clients asking if they should prepay their property taxes, the taxes allotted for 2017, if they should prepay their property taxes
Well,
by the end of 2017 in order
sure.
to get that deduction.
I've gotten those same calls.
Absolutely.
Maybe about 60 of them I got in about a 2-week period.
Yes.
Anyway, the long and the short, there is guidance on that. And the guidance is this. In 2017, of course, it's too late now, but in 2017, if the tax was assessed
Yes.
in 2017, you could prepay it. So even if it was due in July and it was assessed in 2017, you could pay it before 12/31 and take that deduction in 2017 when it would have meant more to you.
Yes.
But if it was not assessed, you can't prepay it
Right. Absolutely.
and get the deduction. You can prepay it, but you can't get the deduction,
Right.
which is why you would do it.
yes.
And the IRS was very clear about that. New York State,
Yes.
the governor of New York State created a bill and passed it saying that you could take 2018 taxes, whether they were assessed or whether they weren't assessed. I don't know. That's clashing with the IRS rules.
was a pretty
so
bold.
I don't know how that's going to work out.
Right. Right.
You know,
Yeah.
but the safe way would be if it's assessed in 17 and you can prepay it. Now, there's another caveat to that, and that's the alternative minimum tax.
Yes.
If you fall into the alternative minimum tax, you shouldn't pay it because you're not going to get the benefit of that deduction.
Right. Right. So everybody really is a case by case.
It's absolutely, you know, what's your situation is not somebody else's situation. You must look at every situation.
Yes. So this year is really the year to essentially review your entire situation, your financial situation, along with your tax situation. What we're running into in our office is most of our clients are in the required minimum distribution phase. So we calculate, obviously, their required minimum distribution, and if they happen to need income beyond that distribution, try to figure out where the most tax advantageous way to take the income is. And now we're kind of in limbo because of the changes in the different brackets, even though we still have the seven brackets, the ranges have changed.
The ranges, the percentages have changed
Yes.
somewhat.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm one of those people that requires a minimum distribution. I hate to say it because
I was going to say, I don't think you're that old.
no, I'm afraid I do. And so I looked at that and said, okay, what is it going to mean to me? But it doesn't have much of a meaning to me. And most
Right.
people, I don't think, for 18, I don't think it would have that much of a difference.
Well,
Because
if
they have to take it anyway.
pensions and
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
They have to take it
They
anyway.
have to take it, right.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, even those cases are different because if you have to take a required minimum distribution and you're gainfully employed, you can use a 401k, you can use a
offset.
SEP if you're self-employed, so you can put it back.
Yes.
So every situation is different, even in the RMD field. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. So talking about RMDs, let's kind of shift to the changes in the Roth IRA. Well, the change in the sense that I know it's not a big change,
Yeah,
but
there's what happens, you're still allowed to do that. You're still allowed to convert a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. But the recharacterization that you could do before, you can't do anymore. So once you do it, you're stuck with it.
Right.
That's really the only
right.
change.
And I don't really run into a lot of that, do you?
Not at all.
Okay.
My customers, most of them, they wouldn't do that anyway.
Right.
they wouldn't want to pay the tax on the, because you have to pay the tax on the traditional IRA when you take it out.
Right, absolutely.
So unless they're given a special treatment of maybe going over 3 or 4 years and taking it that way, they wouldn't do that. Yeah, I wouldn't advise that.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Changes in Obamacare.
Well, nothing in 2018. It starts in 2019, where the individual mandate is repealed, so that you're not now required to carry health insurance. And you don't have to pay a penalty if you don't have health insurance. But that's for 2019. So for 18,
It's really a non-issue.
it's really a non-issue.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's for 19 and moving forward. And you know what, these days, I'm not so sure that it's even going to be valid in 19 because they can change it.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think it's an issue for the future. And I think that right now, the sentiment is for them to try to change it. But I don't know if that's going to be the same moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is, you know, it's a minor change, but it's one that I guess we can look forward to Obamacare being around still in 19. Yeah.
We were talking before the show started about some changes that you are aware of that really haven't been made as public as some of the changes that we're discussing right now. And one of the changes that caught my attention had to do with teachers' pensions in Connecticut, which I think is a big one.
Yeah. Well, and the pensions for teachers in Connecticut, about 3 years ago, the legislature decided that teachers, we want to try to keep our retired teachers in Connecticut. So the first year, I think it was in 15, they said that, okay, 10% of your teacher's pension is tax-free for Connecticut only, not for federal.
Right. So if they move out of Connecticut, they lose that 10%.
Well, yeah,
Tax-free, yes.
they would fall under the auspices of whatever state they move to.
Right.
Yeah, so hopefully they were hoping that they would keep some teachers, retired teachers in Connecticut. So 10% of it became non-taxable. And then in 16, they raised it to 25%, and in 17, it was supposed to be 50%. So if your pension was $50,000, $25,000 of it was non-taxable to Connecticut.
Right, which is a huge chunk.
Which is a big incentive. But the state was so strapped with funds that they reverted back to 25% for 17 and 18. So it's not going to be as big a benefit for retirees, teacher retirees. They also had if your income, your adjusted gross income is under $100,000, any pension now, there's part of it that's not taxable.
Any pension in Connecticut?
Any pension. I think if you're under a certain amount, and I forget the numbers. Maybe under 50,000 is 14% of your pension is not taxable.
Is this new?
This is new.
Oh, okay.
This is new.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
About 14% of it is not taxable.
Under 50,000?
Under 50,000, and then up to 75,000, maybe it's 25%. And or the other way around, it's less.
Right.
So there is a portion that's not going to be taxable for regular pensions as well.
That's great. Yeah.
You know, and that's in keeping with our neighbor state. New York has the first $20,000
Yes.
of your pension is not taxable.
And that's for New York pensions, right? And
Well,
pensions
no,
for,
New York State pensions
New
are
York
not
State.
taxable in New York State. Period.
I thought it was up to 20,000.
Any other pension in New York State,
Oh, okay.
the first 20,000 is not taxable.
Right.
So you have New York, let's say New York teachers, New York policemen, New York firemen. Those pensions are not taxable in New York State, fully taxable in Connecticut.
Right.
Except now there will be that exclusion I think it's up to 14 or 15%
Right.
for those pensions.
Right. And for those people in retirement, that's a pretty big.
Oh yeah,
That could be a pretty
because
big
the
savings
state,
for them.
Yeah, the state has been losing a lot of people,
Yes.
especially retirees.
Yes, I have quite a few retirees who are really, struggling with just the rising costs of living in Connecticut.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a big problem for Connecticut.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only other issue for Connecticut that I can think of is that we had a tax credit of up to $200. When they first started with the tax credit, it was $500. And then over a few years, it was reduced to $300 and then finally to $200
Right. Right.
for property tax, car tax, real estate tax, up to $200. And it was phased out as certain income levels were reached. Well, now they've eliminated it except for people that are 65 or older, or if you have a dependent, you can still claim up to that $200 credit. But that also is still phased out by by your income.
Right. And do you know what that income is off the top of your head?
I'm going to say that you're eliminated at the $100,000
At the 100.
level.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting.
And those regulations just came out. I mean, it was the last week in December.
Yes.
Yeah.
Medical expense deductions.
In 2017, there is a change for 2017.
Yes, that's why I wanted you to talk
And,
about this.
What happened was everybody in 2017 was subject to the 10% floor. In other words, whatever your adjusted gross income was, the first 10% of it you couldn't deduct.
Right.
And then anything over that you would deduct. It was 7.5%, then it was raised to 10, except for those over 65. And in 2017, it was supposed to be 10%. So they lost that differentiation.
Right.
They changed it back to 7.5% for everybody
That's great.
for 17 and 18. So you do get that benefit.
Right.
And
Which
it
is
is a
huge.
significant benefit for
retirees
yeah,
who
for
are-
retirees and yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. Yes.
And if you have high medical expenses, it is a big
It's a big number.
number,
Yes, yes. I'm actually going to reach out to you after the show because as we're having this conversation, I have a particular client who kind of falls into all of what we've talked about, the pension, the medical.
Yeah.
So I would like to pick your brain after
sure.
the show. Let's talk about some of the other changes, cash donations to charities.
Donations to charity did not change, except that they had a limitation,
Yes.
which was 50% of your AGI, and they made it 60% of your AGI. I've never seen any of my customers over the years reach that. In other words, if your AGI is $100,000, you could donate up to $50,000 to a charity, to a 501c3 organization. They've now changed that to 60%.
Yes.
So that's a small change for most people. Most people are not involved, but if you're in that category, you are able to donate a little more and deduct it.
Right, right. Circling back to the individual side of the changes that are currently in place are set to expire in 2025.
That's correct.
And the corporate changes
Same way.
in
I
2025.
think 2025, they're going to change it, I'm sure.
Yeah,
by
at some
then.
point, yes.
But yeah, that's what I think they're all set
Oh,
for
okay.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
On the individual side, there's one issue which I don't know if they're going to change it, and that is that $10,000 limitation on tax deduction.
Yes.
You combine your income tax, your real estate tax, your personal property tax, or your sales tax, either income or
Right.
sales, and your limitation is at $10,000. Now, in this part of the country, most people are going to exceed that.
Yes. Right.
Because let's say a person makes $75,000 and the state tax on that is about $5,000. So there's $5,000 right there. And your real estate tax is $6,000. Well, you've already exceeded it. And you've got personal property tax.
Right.
So you're not going to be able to take advantage of those deductions.
Right.
Up to $10,000 only is what you can deduct.
Right.
So they're estimating that 90% of the population are not going to be able to itemize in the whole country.
And that was going to be one of my questions. They're almost, in my opinion, they're almost trying to push you towards taking the standard deduction to make it
That's
simpler.
exactly what they're doing.
Yes.
That's exactly what they're doing. They're estimating 90% of the tax returns will not be able to itemize. The other itemized item that is going away is the unreimbursed business expense.
Yes.
And miscellaneous deductions, tax preparation fees, safe
Financial
deposit box,
advisory
financial fees,
fees.
which in some cases, some of my customers, that's $10,000, $12,000, $13,000 or more.
I know.
So that's
I
a
know.
big deduction.
That's a big deduction.
Yeah.
That's a whole other conversation.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, some it's insignificant, but a lot of them is not. You know, if they have a big portfolio, it's a big
right.
big fees.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest changes that I find kind of amusing, the elimination of the bicycle commuter
Yeah.
deduction.
I don't know that I've ever had any of my clients with that deduction, but yeah.
Yeah.
What else in itemized deductions are different? Mortgage interest.
Yes.
They've lowered the maximum mortgage
From-
to $750,000,
from $1 million to
which
$750,000.
is for most people not a big one unless you have a $1 million mortgage.
Right.
But
And for
they-
new mortgages, correct?
for new mortgages.
Yes.
And the big thing though is the home equity line. If it was used for home improvement, was deductible. Home equity lines are out.
Yes.
They're not deductible.
Yes.
Second home is not going to be deductible. So
Yeah.
those are some things that are going to impact some of our clients.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We are going to be wrapping up.
Oh.
If anybody has any questions for Anthony, do you want to give out your phone number
Sure.
and
You
website?
can reach me at 203-797-9227 or my email, anthony@adtaxprep.com. I have a website, adtaxprep.com, if you want to look me up that way.
Okay, if you could just do it again a little slower.
Oh, all right. 203-797-9227. Anthony@adtaxprep.com. And my website is adtaxprep.com.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.